Walking a path along the roots of Pikes Peak, you take a fork in the road towards the Anselm Society Digital Pub. Inside is a raucous conversation on the arts, faith, and, well, bad writing. In the corner by the fire are 3 people. One of them is abashedly confessing a fault in a past attempt at novel writing, and that's me, your co-host, Christina Brown. Welcome to Believe to See, a podcast of the Anselm Society Arts Guild. Here at Believe to See, we explore the relationship between faith, art, and storytelling. Our goal is to connect the great story, the great stories, and our own stories so that we can better understand what it means to live with a Christian imagination. Today, we'll be talking about what makes a good female protagonist. We'll dissect some examples from popular stories and attempt to determine which characteristics we should look for in narratives that prominently feature a female lead. And lastly, we will discuss what components might be necessary for creating a good female protagonist in our own creative work. And I'm honored to be here today with my 2 co-hosts, Matt and Evangeline. Welcome.
Hello.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, Christina, I noticed you used the word abashedly.
I did.
So that means, so unabashed would be you're just not, so abashed means you're like embarrassed or
yes,
you
correct.
are bashed.
You're abashed.
You are bashed.
Oh, you
No,
are bashed.
I don't know. I'm just throwing it out there because that.
Well, bashful. Oh,
Yes, bash is the root word, right?
That makes sense.
And to bash someone is to, like denigrate them. So you're denigrating yourself. You're bashing yourself.
Yes.
Well, there we go.
Correct.
Can you tell us the story of this prior failed novel?
Tell us everything you did wrong.
Everything I did wrong. Mostly, I made a terrible female lead protagonist. So,
Been there.
yeah.
Been there, done that. So
Glad to hear
I've
I'm
done
not
that
the only
too,
one.
actually.
all right.
Yay, look at us.
We're in good
I
company.
accidentally created a manic pixie dream girl in one of my stories.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
That's easy to do. 'Cause-
It's surprisingly easy, especially if you're a nerdy dude,
Yeah.
We're especially susceptible to them.
The curse of the manic pixie dream girls.
Oh
Yeah.
man, I feel like I need to hear the story sometime. Sounds very promising. All right, well, before we dive in, I first wanted to clarify a few things for the listener. So we all agree that a good protagonist must have kind of the same qualities. They have to be relatable to the reader in some way. They can't be wholly detestable with no redeeming qualities or wholly pure with no faults. I think even an evil protagonist needs to embody something we can identify with, like a compelling inner dialogue or weakness that is relatable enough to our imaginations before that character is given permission to play the role of protagonist. So, with those assumptions in place, we want to talk about what makes a good female protagonist. So I have a question for you guys to start off. Feel
Okay.
good with it?
Yep, bring it.
I'm ready.
Bring it. Okay. Are there qualities that are universal to all female protagonists that we ought to see embodied in her character? And if so, what are they?
Well, as the resident, super waspy dude, I'd like to defer to Evangeline to start us off here.
Nice. Nice. Okay. I think having sympathetic qualities, and in that I mean something that readers can relate to, a redeeming quality to them. I don't care if they make mistakes, if they do the wrong thing, if they're flawed. I think there needs to be something for us to root for. And if there isn't, at least for me personally, it's really hard to stay interested, to root for them. I want there to be an element of goodness. And I don't mean, like I said, they can make poor choices. They can, go on, kind of a dark arc as long as there's a point of redemption at some point. So that's, I think, what I would argue for.
Would you have to see, do you have to see seeds of that redemption along the way? Or seeds of the intended?
Well, if you don't see seeds of redemption, then it's not an arc. That's an unreliable storyteller, perhaps not a narrator, but an unreliable storyteller. So if they, I mean, though, I guess you can come to a moment where they have an about face, but generally you do see seeds of that change.
Right. Even if the character, him or herself, doesn't see.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Okay, so my
Hey,
turn, I
waspy
guess.
man.
All right, thank you. So, a couple caveats here, because in one sense, I think there are universal qualities that we look for in a hero, whether they're, male, female, or whatever, that are going to be compelling. Those are a lot of the qualities Evangeline just went through. So that's one caveat. Another caveat is when we're dealing with all of these, what makes a good male protagonist, female, all this stuff. We can't get caught up in this thing where, well, there's certain traits that only men can have and certain traits that only women can have.
Okay.
Yes.
But there's the opposite mistake, saying that all human beings are, identical in all ways. There's no other thing. So, there can be qualities that are more often associated with women, there's we could talk about compassion, being more nurturing, that sort of stuff. Again, there's always exceptions. So there are ways to do that. And I think when you look at how women have been portrayed in mass media, even like the past century, you've seen a pendulum swing where at the earlier part of the century, maybe up through the mid-century, it's the stereotypes the other one way, where it's like, oh, damsel in distress, oh, don't look at me, I'm just a girl, hee hee, all that. But now, I guess we're not in that same century anymore. We've swung the other direction, where being a strong woman is completely identical to being kind of a jerk man. So between those two extremes lies the virtue somewhere.
Yes.
But finding the exact virtue of finding someone who is a good embodiment of strong femininity without falling into stereotype or all the bad examples that we're going to get into, that is very difficult, which is probably why we need a whole podcast about it.
Probably why.
Yeah.
That makes sense, though. I did really want to kind of talk about, yes, there are the same qualities in male and female protagonists, but like you said, there are differences that we need to, differentiate between what you said, the kind of woman that's being portrayed in a lot of today's stories and narratives, and how could we separate that from what a good female protagonist ought to be. So, do you guys have any examples? That's kind of what I'm excited about.
Oh, well, we
I
have
wanna hear some
examples.
examples
Do
here.
you want the good ones or the bad ones?
Ooh, I would like Matt the waspy man to give a bad one, and I want Evangeline the brilliant woman to give a good one. I know.
What did Matt?
All right.
What did Matt do this week?
He introduced himself as the waspy man, and I jumped on it. It was great.
Punishment fits the crime. So I want to start with a deep cut here. We're going all the way back to 5th century Athens.
Love
we're going to the play Agamemnon by the Athenian poet Aeschylus. And in the play Agamemnon, let me set the scene for you all, because it's going to take a little bit of stage setting. So Trojan War, right? So Paris kidnaps, or maybe seduces, whatever. It's unclear. Helen of Troy. And Menelaus is Helen's wife, so he needs to go get her back. But Agamemnon is Menelaus' older brother / sort of the most powerful king in Greece. So he needs to go too. It's a family honor thing. He has to, right? He has to. Problem. The goddess Athena is really mad at Agamemnon for a bunch of complicated reasons I can't get into. So it comes through one of the prophets that in order to get the favorable winds to sail to Troy to fulfill his family obligation, he must sacrifice his daughter. Oh, well, the Greeks love putting their heroes in impossible situations. Do I sacrifice my daughter, which is a horrendous evil, or do I fail to uphold my family honor by rescuing my brother's wife, which is also a horrendous evil? He sacrifices the daughter, and he goes to Troy. 10 years later, he returns. In the meantime, Agamemnon's wife, Clytemnestra, who incidentally is a half-sister of Helen, Clytemnestra is pretty ticked off that Agamemnon has sacrificed their daughter and then gone off to war. So in the meantime, Clytemnestra has started to rule the kingdom in his stead and has taken on a lover. This lover happens to be one of Agamemnon's relatives. Complicated. So when Agamemnon gets back, Clytemnestra pretends that she's like, oh, the loving wife. Oh, I missed you so much. Here's this very expensive stuff. Oh, why don't you go get in the bath? And then when he's in the bath, she brutally murders him. Whoa, that was supposed to be the laugh line, but okay. And when Clytemnestra comes out, it's made a theme of the play that Clytemnestra is a woman with the heart of a man. Like, they basically put it that starkly. Mm-hmm. She comes out and she says, hey, see what I had to do? There's the necessity for me to act all lovey-dovey, so I did. But then I killed my husband. I showed no remorse. I'm not sorry at all. I get to be the ruler now. I get to be open with my hot young lover over there. And guess what? I liked killing him. What? And it's those qualities that are seen as making her like a man. So she's undeniably a strong character, right? She rules a country. She kills the king. She takes the crown for herself. So she's a strong woman. But she's seen as being strong because she's essentially a woman who is identical to a jerk man. And I think that is an underlying problem with a lot of very contemporary female protagonists, where the way that lazy writers make them strong, Aeschylus wasn't being lazy, that's the character he made, is to say, oh, this woman is basically a jerk man, therefore she's strong. So Clytemnestra and some of these other ones, Captain Marvel, they're basically one and the same.
I have a question.
Yes.
I admit I kind of lost track of the characters. But do you think the murder at the end of the story is a way to bookend the murder at the beginning of the story?
Yes, so that is a good question. So one of the things about it, and one of the tricky things about Greek tragedy, is they all take place in this Trojan War backdrop that everyone knows.
Yeah.
So like all of us know the Spider-Man origin story. New Spider-Man movie doesn't even have to explain it.
Right.
They have all this stuff they don't explain. Mm-hmm. So Agamemnon's family is kind of cursed, has this like generations long curse where all the family members always kill each other. So that's why the sacrifice of Agamemnon and Clytemnestra's daughter is there. And yes, I do think it's bookended. Yeah. And Clytemnestra is seen as, partially justified in what she does. Like, she says, hey, I killed him because he sacrificed my daughter. And the chorus is basically like, yeah, you're a monster, but that is a fair point, right? So yes, there is something there, and we shouldn't view her as merely evil.
Yeah.
Right?
She was set up as sort of a heroine in a way. Or it's a tragedy play, so kind of, sort of.
Yeah, it's a tragedy, so kind of, sort of. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, to me that feels like a rhetorical device, kind of ending it with the way that it began and making a comment on the murder that began in the beginning and, comeuppance and such. I'm not arguing, though, that she's not a flawed character and not a kind of a poor depiction.
No, I think she's a really well-drawn and interesting character. So when I say she's bad, I'm not meaning like no shade at Aeschylus, right? He drew up a really good character. But I think the reasons that she is seen as strong relate directly to some of the bad characters we're going to get to, right? The fact that her strength derives from being a woman who acts exactly like a jerk man.
Mm-hmm.
All right, that sounds really promising. Let's move on. No, actually, that's really exciting. I want to, as you said, you prepped the scene here as some of the people we will get onto. So I am going to make that something that we are going to get onto later as a teaser. And now will you please give us your wonderful example of a good female protagonist?
I have so many. So I'm trying to think of something of like one of the characters that balances, or that just for the sake of the conversation, that is is a little bit opposite. Mm-hmm. And I'm gonna just throw this out, and like we were talking before, I think this may offend some listeners. It may be controversial. But I am enjoying, and my family is enjoying, the Rings of Power. I mean, should I leave now? Am I just banished now from Anthelm Society?
Not in the least.
I would like to confess my sin, but at the same time, I fully intend to continue.
You're like Clytemnestra. I confess my sin, but I support it.
I'm not sorry at all.
Sorry. I'm watching the Rings of Power. Come at me. Okay, and if anyone else like me is in the closet watching the Rings of Power and you're afraid to admit to your other erudite friends that you're watching the Rings of Power, welcome to the conversation. You and I can just talk. I can just talk to the imaginary person in the room who's also I know. Okay, so I am loving Nori the Harfoot. And Nori, I'm going to try not to do like any like spoilers, although it may be a little bit hard.
I'm 2 episodes behind you, Evangeline. So
okay, but you know
I know Nori.
You just confessed that you're watching the Rings of Power, so I am not alone in my shame.
Can I tell you? I'll give my little thing. All like the people who I follow on social media who are like in the know. Seems like it's like blood sport to talk about how much you hate Rings of Power.
I know.
But then I watch it like, I kind of like this. What's going on, everyone? I miss what?
Exactly.
It's sort of like in the mid-aughts when everyone decided we had to hate Coldplay all of a sudden. It's like, but
I remember that.
What's going on here?
I
forgot about that.
Yeah.
I remember that. Yeah.
So here's what I've heard. I'm in the middle here, so I have not watched it.
Okay.
Mostly because I'm kind of nervous to mess up the good thing. But I have heard it is not good as far as something Tolkien would approve of. Okay. However, it is really good storytelling and very, very interesting on its own. So I was like, okay, and I could go with that.
I would say the visual, the aesthetic is pretty honoring of the original.
I did hear that too. Yeah.
So I appreciate that, and I feel like Nori the Harfoot is a good representative character of. I believe the Harfoots are like.
They're like proto-hobbits.
Ancestors of hobbits.
Yeah.
And they have some of the similar love of the land, love of good food, love of community, which are all things that we like here at Anselm. Like making my case.
And for Nori, so some things that really stuck out to me about her character is she's supposed to be young, right? So like hobbits age differently. She's supposed to be like, if she was a human, she'd be like, what, 8th grade, 9th grade?
She feels very adolescent.
Yeah. So, but she is seen as sort of a mischief maker, troublemaker.
Right.
But she clearly has a good heart.
Yes.
She tries to do the right thing.
Yes.
But doing the right thing, what she believes to be the right thing, often screws up royally.
Yes.
And that is why I find her a compelling character.
Yes. I would agree with you. I would focus on her gentleness, her heart, like her compassion, like you said, and her courage. And as I was looking at my examples of strong female characters that I feel are well done, courage is something that comes out again and again and again. And I think that kind of directly contrasts one of the things that we were talking about that we always see in strong characters that we don't like. And I don't know if you want me to go there yet.
Yes,
Bring
go
that
for
up. Okay, so we were talking about the Mary Sue, which is a character who embodies sort of wish fulfillment. They tend to be more powerful than they ought to be. Or, they have all the power, all the ability that the writer or, reader or whatever wishes that they had. So a Mary Sue is kind of a stand-in for wish fulfillment. So as we were throwing out examples of, characters, strong female characters that we don't like, for instance, Rey from the Star Wars trilogy came up as kind of the ultimate example of a Mary Sue. She starts out with this ability, and where's there for her to go when she already has this amazing talent?
When you say talent and ability, can you just clarify what you mean by that?
I mean, uncommon strength, uncommon skill, magical gifting, or just, straight up talent,
No obvious character flaws.
Right. No struggles or struggles that are, as the consumer of the story, you're not on the edge of your seat. You're like, Rey's going to beat them. I know that. So why should I be interested?
Right, that's the hard
Whereas,
part.
it's fun as a reader to be like, I know this is a good character, so I think that she's going to win, but I'm not sure. That is where you want your audience.
Going back to the Nori thing, I really like the point you made about the compassion being tied to the courage, because I think that is something we don't think of too much when we're putting together our heroes, because, again, compassion's not a cool, like, superhero virtue that we think of. But to be compassionate, you oftentimes have to be very courageous. And Nori, her character, her courage is shown in the acts of compassion that she shows to people who are being disregarded by the rest of her community.
Yes.
Like, that's the way her courage is expressed.
And it's not just bravery. It's not just recklessness. Like, you might say Iron Man, not female, but, Iron Man is... brave. He's a bit of a Mary Sue. He's if there's a masculine version of a Mary Sue, which that's a whole.
He knows it though.
That's a whole other topic. Whole other topic. I'm not going to go there right now. But he has all this ability. He is brave and he is reckless. So courage is different than that quality. Courage costs the character.
Yeah.
It is a virtue.
Do you think
bravery
courage
can be too, but
do you think courage requires compassion?
That's a good question. Not necessarily, but I think the most compelling examples, the characters that grab my attention, they're very closely related. And definitely in Nori's character, she comes across a situation where, she has the choice to show courage and compassion, or probably her community would have just stayed out of it because that's for big folk or whatever. It's not their business. So
very Hobbiton thing to do generations later.
Exactly. And so she stands out because she chooses there's an element of curiosity with her, and then definitely the compassion. And so
for her, it takes courage to have the compassion. Okay. Yeah.
Well, and also that is partly because she is not flawed, but this is another trait that I think is especially compelling and necessary when you're crafting a female character, and that's vulnerability. Because
I love that.
What's really annoying about, there was that trend, and I know because I was writing in that like aughts, time, 2000 to 2010, and maybe there was a backlash, maybe there was a reason that the pendulum swung towards
to the backlash to the backlash,
the pendulum swung towards the badass heroine.
Like that is such a trope in YA literature of a certain time period. Like they're all the same.
And I felt like
when you say certain time period, I just want to, what time period? Can you give a generalization, you guys?
4 through, you could give me an input better than I could.
Yeah, like, I mean,
Hunger Games
12,
on.
Hunger Games.
So you consider Hunger Games one of those? Okay.
Yeah, although, I mean, I would make a case for Katniss, but, as being vulnerable and as having courage. But,
sure.
But she definitely is badass. So is Triss in the Divergent series. Yeah, it was definitely the way to go to make your female character strong and badass and able to fight, which none of those things are bad, but I feel like you're doing a disservice, especially to young readers, especially young girl readers, in telling them that they can't be vulnerable. They have to have the weight of the world on their shoulders. They have to go and fight without adequate support. I mean, there's a lot of pressure on young girls anyway, and then to have that kind of fed to you that you need to be this
is the picture of a hero,
this superwoman who doesn't need help. That's really dangerous and damaging, I think. And
the flip side of that is really interesting too, because I think around the same time period, again, Evangeline, you know this better than me, it seemed like while it's just the the kick butt, emotions are for chumps, heroine comes. There's also the dude that they always fall in love with in the book is always seen as having flaws because he's like a bad boy or whatever.
Yeah.
Friggin' bad boys. They're all over the place, even in this. Anyway.
Well, Matt, what can I tell you? That's not going to change anytime soon.
But these bad boys are always given a scene of vulnerability where it's like, oh, his mom is a drug dealer and he's just very, or like, oh, his dad abandoned him, or all this stuff. So the dude, the bad boy dude, is allowed to have the scene of vulnerability.
Yeah, which is good.
Yeah, which is good. In a lot of heroes, like look at the Marvel heroes. The dudes show emotion. They are all obviously flawed. They weep openly. Mm-hmm. But the YA heroines, Captain Marvel, they're not allowed to cry. Only the dudes are allowed to have emotions now.
Yeah, yeah, and I feel like that was the pendulum swing. It's like almost it was a phase we had to go through before we got older and wiser, and then we're like, no, we're doing it. Yes, we can portray women as strong, and we should do that, but we're through our phase of showing them as, impenetrable. Yeah. And, let's make them more human like we've now allowed our heroes to be here. So, yeah.
Captain America's allowed to cry, so I guess the rest of us can too.
Yes. Good point. Well said.
Well said. There you go. Well, I was going to say, that's an interesting segue into just kind of the next part of what I wanted to talk about was, I think as consumers of, narratives, just in general stories, we really want our protagonist to be strong, either beginning, middle, or end, preferably the end, because we want to, go along the arc, as sort of as you're saying. But, we kind of need that to identify with them, and it gives us kind of the courage as readers to hopefully learn something from them, right? So it's like we crave that. But I think being a strong woman is that phrase, like we were talking about, that's just garnered way too much attention. But I do like that. I like the idea of being a strong woman.
Yeah, me too.
But for me, I think what's hard, and like my daughter, thinking about my daughter, she's almost 5. But the strong women in today's shows and stories seem to have a one-note character, and they have to be spunky, headstrong, outspoken, and rebellious. And for me, that's that's just, to me, that just says, well, I'm undisciplined. Where does discipline come into being a strong woman in portraying these traits? And the reason partly I think that is go back to my daughter, and she is very strong-willed and headstrong and opinionated, and she's wonderful, but she has those qualities, and so she is kind of like we were talking about, and you're like, well, that's not good for young girls to see. But I actually was really curious in both my kids' response to kind of this sort of question. So last night I asked them, I was like, guys, what do you think? What would you, do you like to see girls in stories? And she's like, yeah. And then so I asked my son, I was like, well
not as much as I like seeing dinosaurs in stories, but girls are
all right.
Well, Evan, he's funny. He's like, yes, because I like girls. And I was like, all right, bud. And I was like, how about you, Edith? And she's like, I said, do you like girls in stories? She's like, yes. And I like them with a bow and an arrow. Ka-choo-choo. And she's doing the bow and arrow shot.
I love it.
I do too. It's just adorable. But again, we're like, okay, well, what are some stories that can show her that kind of courage and bravery, that element of strength? Because let's face it, I don't have the strength to kill something with a bow and arrow. Personally, that's a lot to ask. But where could this discipline come in for that? How can we? Anyway, all that to say, I kind of want to know where are the women in these stories who have those qualities but don't need to be in the spotlight or have that sort of undisciplined nature?
I would argue that in talking about discipline, what we're talking about is wisdom. Mm-hmm. And we use the term discipline as when you're raising a child, and they talk back. And
I guess I was thinking self-discipline.
Self-discipline.
That's what I was thinking.
Which is what we develop, which is wisdom.
Right.
So that's what I was getting at. Yeah. How do we use strength? How do we use our voice, to affect change, but not to simply cause trouble? Which, and trouble can be good. You can cause good trouble, but you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. Adding to a situation, making it worse. I think what we're talking about, and what I was talking about earlier when we were talking about that phase that we had to get through, that's acquiring wisdom. And so I think, if you're showing a heroine who does not have that, it's apparent. And you're like willing to go with them as they have flaws. You're willing to go with them as they learn. But if they don't ever learn and they keep making the same, like especially self-destructive, like I'm just thinking of a couple of TV shows. One that I'm like, I just could not finish. I could not go any further, which is fine. Because she just continued to make self-destructive mistakes.
Can you name the show?
I'd rather not.
Okay, fine.
She can confess the rings of power, but not this other show.
I watched one episode. It was or 2 episodes maybe, and I was like, she's so self-destructive. And maybe if I had hung in there, maybe there would have been a character arc. So that's why I don't want to say, because what if there was a redeeming character arc later in the story? But I was like, is it going to just be this? You destroying yourself without there ever being any sort of glimmer of what you might hope for beyond self-destruction.
Well, I think there's one of the mistakes that you can see in the badly drawn up, quote unquote, strong female protagonists is the idea that there's nothing that they have to learn. You can see this in both Captain Marvel and in Rey in the Star Wars sequels. So Captain Marvel, she's super powerful. The movie can't quite decide what she wants or what she's haunted by because she's pretty much perfect. She has a total grip on her emotions. And this trainer is trying to help her. And at the end, she's like, no, there's nothing you have to teach me. Like, oh, that's the twist. She realizes she already knows everything. That's not character growth, right? Realizing that you don't have to learn. And the same thing with Rey, where, again, Rey is introduced as a character with really no flaws. She's poor, but I think we can all agree that's not a flaw. She's discovered, and then she's totally awesome right away. She's a natural. She kicks Kylo Ren's butt with a lightsaber right away. And then she goes to learn from Luke Skywalker. But then what really comes out is, twist, Luke has to learn from her. So it's like, okay, cool. So Rey already knows everything too. So because both of these characters have it all figured out, we as the audience don't get to see them identify this flaw in themselves and grow from it.
And we can't see ourselves in them, which I think is a huge part of good storytelling, right? We want to be able to see ourselves in the story and know how to move forward with our own lives. Like, one of the primary ways we learn as humans is through story. So if you're not giving good stories with good female protagonists, how are females going to learn how to be good females?
Well, there you
go. Wasn't that articulate, you guys?
There's like a smug...
Be a good female.
There's like a smug moment of satisfaction, and I will admit, I get that. That guess what? You have nothing to teach me. I mean, who hasn't felt that?
Oh, sure.
But then, where do you go? And it's like beyond that moment of smug satisfaction where we're all like, see... I do know something, I am. And what we're really wanting is just validation. We're just wanting to know that we have something to bring to the table. And, and there's a reason that there is this backlash right now in this, moment in time with, females stepping up and saying, hey, you don't have anything to teach me. There's a reason for that, and there's a place for that even. But beyond that, especially in a story, it's like, where are we going from here?
Yeah.
And again, sometimes that narrative makes more sense if that particular person has a character arc of her own.
Exactly.
Yeah.
If we had seen the character arc, and that's kind of what we're missing.
Yeah.
It's like women have these stories of being talked down to or whatever, but we're not seeing that so much in the movie or in the story. And so therefore it doesn't have satisfaction. It doesn't
Right.
have
Like,
meaning.
It would be like, you can imagine, I'm sure there's stories that do this, a character arc where the character's flaw is she has no confidence in herself, or she's so
Right.
beaten down and she needs to,
Yes. Yes.
do that. But again, that's not Rey, that's not
Right.
Captain Marvel. They don't seriously doubt themselves, and why would they? Because they're awesome.
Apparently
Right.
not Clytemnestra either, right? Clytemnestra?
Clytemnestra does not. She does not struggle.
She does
with,
not doubt herself.
She does not struggle with self-doubt.
Yeah.
Or self-discipline, apparently.
Well, actually, she had to be very disciplined in tricking her husband into thinking that she still loved him, getting him to get into the bathtub before throwing a net over him and slitting his throat.
Okay.
So that she had a lot of discipline.
Okay.
Okay.
Anywho, Greek tragedy.
I know. Where do you go from there?
Okay, can I add along these lines though?
Please do.
One of the good things though, when we start to admit our characters can have flaws, is there's a lot of flaws out there, and that leads to a lot more possible characters. You'll know, like, you could take Rey in Captain Marvel, or Mulan in the new Disney live-action Mulan, or any of these other bad characters. You could swap them in and out. They're the same character. You wouldn't notice anything, right?
Although I do like Mulan a little bit more than some of these others.
The live-action one?
Yes, the live action. I think there
Okay.
are some good qualities there. So continue, but I do have a
can
little
put
bit of
up-
a disagreement.
You can put up a defense for it if you want, where she's like perfect and knows magic.
But she has, well, at least in my opinion, she has a little bit of a humility there. I think that can be-
Exactly. She's perfect. She's not even proud.
Not sure I go there. Not sure I agree with that.
I think Evangeline concedes that I won the argument there. But,
I have not seen the Mulan
but,
live action, so I have no opinion.
I also think her actions are born out of like a lot of kind of trauma. Like it's in the very beginning, like her old father is sent to, she knows he's going to die. And so she kind of has this own arc in the very beginning of the story where she realizes she has to step up.
I've seen the like animated version.
The animated version actually has a good protagonist because she's legitimately a screw up at the beginning. She's bad at all the army stuff at first, and she only kind
Well,
of.
she is in
True.
the live action too.
But she's magical.
No.
She's magical. She
Yeah.
has magic powers in the live action.
Yeah.
I don't remember that. But I do remember her being a screw up. She's constantly like breaking bowls and stuff.
Okay. I'm gonna make a little confession here that might undermine my argument. I haven't seen the new Mulan.
Shame.
But I still think I won the argument. Okay, so let's go. Can we do another
Keep
example?
going though. Keep going though.
So these could be like characters that we can debate about because me and you feel opposite about them, Christina, but they're very similar as characters. Because I had Wonder Woman from the recent movie, not Wonder Woman 84, but Wonder Woman as an example of a good female protagonist. I think she's a good character. You did not like her.
Correct.
Do you
It's
care
okay, you can throw me under the
Do you
bus,
care to
that's fine.
explain yourself?
I honestly think, well, okay, so part of it for me, honestly, was way more of like the female side of this, and we could go into this too, but there was almost too much Hollywood in the superhero for me. Like there was just, yeah. I mean, it's funny because like I watched it with Brian for the first time, and I was just like, oh, girls don't look like that after being in a battle, or oh my gosh, like look at her eye makeup. Oh my gosh, her hair, seriously? And like it was just very funny because it was just like, okay, like I really want to identify with Wonder Woman, but I can't right now because she's a glam girl. And I think they take part of that into her character as well. So I'm not speaking against the comics themselves, but against the particular rendition of the movie. There you go. That is
Okay, so other than I agree that she is preternaturally glamorous after her battles, but
it's like all the women who like run and shoot in high heels,
Or wake up in the morning looking perfect.
yes,
Yeah.
all their makeup on. And,
Yeah.
sorry.
That's how I
it's
look
a
in the
thing.
morning.
Exactly. We want characters we can identify with. Sorry, Matt. You'll never understand.
maybe this is male privilege, right? I never thought like, oh gosh, look at Thor. His hair still looks so awesome after battle. My hair never looks like that.
After battle.
Yeah. But I'm done wielding my warhammer. My hair is just a mess. But anyway, okay, so beyond that, the character qualities, though, I thought were compelling.
Okay.
You can't, I will admit, she's open to the Mary Sue allegations. But...
As is Mulan, in fairness.
Yes, these are both potential Mary Sues. I like one, you like the other. Evangeline can be the judge.
But you win, of course, because you always do.
Oh, yeah. But the things I liked about the Wonder Woman character is, even though she is absolutely a strong character, she's, she does kick butt. She's not, again, just like some jerk dude. Like, she's seen as having almost superhuman-like compassion for the people around her. Like, one of the things that bothers her when she gets to the human world is there's so much suffering all around and no one will let me help them. Mm-hmm. She isn't seen as just, tough and emotionless. Mm-hmm. She cries when people she loves dies. I read an article about this pointing out the fact that she is seen openly liking babies, ice cream, and dancing, right? Like, she has more dimensions than just being a warrior. Mm-hmm. Which I found very compelling. She's able to fulfill the kick butt stuff while still having some stuff that we associate with more the classically feminine.
Mm-hmm. But are they faults or are they emotions?
Well, that's the thing. Like, I'm trying to identify like what her faults are. I think you could say that her story arc is coming to terms with the brokenness and fallenness of the world around her, which I'm not sure is quite the arc that we're looking at. So maybe she doesn't fulfill the test I'm looking at. Maybe I like her despite her not fulfilling the test. What do you think, Evangeline?
I'm trying to think right now of a flaw, and I'm struggling. Yeah.
Do you like the Wonder Woman character?
I do. I really liked the first movie. Mm-hmm. I barely remember the second one, which says something. But yeah,
that's true though.
I did like the first one for the reasons that you were talking about. For her being seen to, have such compassion, to really see the suffering around her, to get up and do something about it. But yeah, I can't think of an obvious flaw right now.
So maybe she's a Mary Sue, but a more unique one? Like Captain Marvel, Mulan, Rey, they're kind of the boring Mary Sues because there's all sorts of them. But Wonder Woman's a different Mary Sue. Maybe we need a different name for them both.
The Mary Ellen.
Mary Ellen.
I don't know.
Mary Jo.
I don't know. I mean, because Wonder Woman does have power from the get-go.
Mm-hmm. Well, okay, one character arc she does do is at the beginning of the film, she talks about how she wants to be like a big, kick butt war hero. And then like one of her mentor figures, like a mom or an aunt's like, no, wars aren't great. They're not glorious. You shouldn't try to, just advance by war. Then maybe you could see toward the end she, talks about, but it's not like she's uncompassionate at the beginning.
No.
Well, let's move away. I want to move away from the superhero part of it because there are some exceptions to, like, we all kind of want to be superheroes. Like, my kid's favorite movie is like The Incredibles. Like, they watch it over and over again, but that's okay. We all want to be like superheroes, but let's face it, we know that none of us are ever going to be that kind of superhero.
We're not going to be superheroes?
I know, my poor daughter was disappointed too. No, but
this is the stuff I told you to rein me in from. But so my kids are super into Spider-Man recently. They're all about into the Spider-Verse. So whenever they see a spider now, I can tell they're actively rooting for it to bite them so they can turn into Spider-Man.
That is not a good situation.
Dad, maybe a spider will bite me and I'll turn into Spider-Man. Well, maybe, buddy. I don't know.
That's hilarious.
Yeah, the other week, our cat ate a spider. And so my 18-year-old was watching to see if she became Spider Cat. So,
okay, well, there you go.
I guess it just continues.
We all have dreams. We have dreams. And superheroes are amongst them. But let's talk about, a little bit more about more of the realistic sort of approaches to heroines / female protagonists. I really kind of want to go into those qualities that are more real life, right? So what about the women who can kind of do their heroic deeds out of the spotlight, who can sort of take some of that courage, nobility, and sacrifice and really act on it, inwardly, more inwardly, and kind of like you were talking about, I don't remember the character's name because I have not seen Rings of Power, but that the small hobbit person, Nori?
Nori.
Yeah,
Yes.
like when the courage it takes to kind of be compassionate and step outside of something that, her family kind of, is comfortable with, right? It's not a rebellious act, right? It's not, well, you guys just aren't good enough. It's let me show you how to do it. It's like, no, I feel convicted that this is the right thing.
Right.
Yeah. So
And it's not in any way for glory.
Right.
It's not a big, story with all the bells and whistles. I mean, Rings of Power is, but Nori's particular story is very quiet, and it's a simple Harfoot making decisions that she is convicted about, like you said, that probably are not going to be written down or sung about, or they're not going to be the deeds that are passed down in the epic songs.
And you get the impression at some points that Nori doesn't even want to do them, but she feels like she has to.
Yeah.
Because she knows it's the right thing. She's like, so then she sort of does it anyway.
Yeah.
So she's not seeking any sort of glory or anything. She's just genuinely trying to do what she thinks is the right thing.
Well, again, there's like this almost like the self-discipline you're talking about even battling our own faults within ourselves, right? Like,
Well,
a lot of us don't really want to jump into those situations.
And that is where as I inevitably do, bring this conversation back around to Jane Austen. Because that is one of the many things she is fantastic at, in giving us lead characters who are likable and relatable, but have definite flaws, and you can see their character arc with them recognizing their flaws and moving beyond them. So it's showing some character strength, like Elizabeth Bennet in Pride and Prejudice. She's a very likable, very relatable character, but she is, proud and a little prejudiced, right? Or she makes snap judgments about people. She is too reliant on her own cleverness, and she overlooks good qualities in others. And she comes to learn about this as the novel goes on. And another related example is Emma, where, again, she's very likable in a lot of ways. She's smart. What is it? Handsome, clever, rich. But
a little shallow.
Yeah, she's not stuck up for someone who is handsome, clever, and rich. She's not vain, but she is very sure of herself. Much more sure of herself than someone of her age and inexperience should be. So she thinks she can meddle in other people's affairs and that she knows best. And after she meddles and things go terribly, she learns a lesson, and we can follow her with that.
And she suffers too. I mean, she suffers through it. Yeah,
she suffers herself, and part of it is she realizes she's unintentionally been causing other people to suffer because of her faults. And that's like, there's a really great scene of character growth in there. So again, nothing, planet saving like Captain Marvel, but that is showing strength of character in sort of the more everyday situations.
And I like Emma and Elizabeth Bennet too, in the sense that like them sort of like there's the pay the price moment where they see how their bad decisions have harmed someone else, right? Because that's also something you kind of, when you want to see that redemptive arc, sometimes you want to see remorse involved. You want to see like, okay, like I see my flaws affecting others, and that is not okay with me. So I kind of, I like that, and in those two characters in particular. So before we move on, can you give Evangeline? Can you give a wonderful, noble, female character? I really want.
Are the Bronte sisters about to make an appearance?
They might. I really want to know, though, before we move on to my last question, I really want to just sort of pull some characteristics from good female protagonists that we can look for in our consumption of stories and film and things like that.
Well, I know, like, I always bring up Jane Eyre.
And that's why we love you. That's
one of the reasons. That's why you put up with me. You're like, just go ahead and get it out. Come on. But, one of my favorite things about Jane Eyre is her integrity, her determination to do the right thing, even when it really does hurt her. So I would argue for her as being one of those quiet, everyday heroines that you really can see yourself if that was me, would I have the courage and the integrity to make the decision that she did, to leave and to do the right thing?
Can you describe for the audience? I know it might be a spoiler, but can you kind of?
It's
hard to make that argument without.
Okay, so I'm talking specifically about the crux of the story when she finds out that Rochester has deceived her. He is already married. She is in love with him. There is an argument for an argument in the reader's hearts, not really an argument logically or legally. That
good distinction there.
That Rochester, has. You feel for the poor guy. He's married to a mad woman.
Who tries to kill him with a house fire,
Yes, who does try to kill him.
He keeps her in the attic.
Okay, you want
a well-furnished attic.
I was going to say, are you going to go there? Because he treats her better than she would have been treated anywhere else. But, okay, we'll just put a pin in that.
You say attic like so pejoratively. It's a nice attic,
It's a nice attic. She has a woman who attends her all the time, and seriously, she would have been treated like an animal in an insane asylum. So that's the alternative. But anyway.
But Jane's choice.
She is in love with him. She finds out this truth, and she leaves. And it's wrenching. It's gut-wrenching. And you're like, as a reader, you're like, no, wait, couldn't you stay? And you're even like trying to make the argument in your head. No, wait, but this, but that. And then you're like, no, there is no argument for you staying and marrying this guy who's already married. You can't do it.
Walking away from love, true love, basically, because it's the
right thing to do.
Yeah.
And that, I think, is that is Jane, is her integrity. So what was I supposed to do?
No, you were supposed to. No, you did it. What do we look for in characters? We look for integrity.
Integrity, courage, compassion. One of my other favorite stories is The Shape of Water, which is not a modern, but a fairy tale kind of set in the 60s, I think. And it is another heroine. She's very vulnerable. She's mute, actually. She's just a cleaning lady in this government facility. And she comes across this beast who is imprisoned. And she has, all the reasons not to help. She is really... she could lose her job, she could lose her life, it's dangerous, and, she does the right thing. So again, integrity, courage, compassion.
I love it.
Yeah, so I will say, one of the many reasons I'm happy we're having this conversation is I am trying to develop some compelling female characters in my book. There's one in particular where her original purpose in the story is to be the love interest of the real protagonist, the dude. And I'm like, ooh, that sounds really bad. I need to flesh her out and make her a three-dimensional character. And then I see why Captain Marvel's and Ray's happen.
Oh, interesting.
Dude writers like me know they have to do a strong female character, but they're afraid if they give her flaws, she won't be strong and people will get mad at them online. So trying to figure out a way to flesh someone out and make them a compelling character is very difficult, and it's a little scary. It would be a lot easier if the protagonist just falls in love with, Mary Sue.
So female protagonists aren't the only ones who need courage. Male authors need courage.
Yes.
I believe in you.
Thank you.
I believe in you.
Thank you.
It's fair though.
That's a brave admission.
I know it is. I think there's a lot to that. I think, again, I do not envy that in you, and takes courage, and I admire that. So, but back to that, I do want to get to our last question, because we've talked a little bit about this already, but and we talked about kind of the last few decades, even when you guys were talking about the novels and the YA fiction and stuff. But I think even the last few years in particular, we talked about also the more modern, like superhero movies, etc. All that to say, they've kind of discouraged me, because the embodiment of the strong woman has been so shallow. even so much as that, like, the portrayals of historical characters are being, like, reshaped into our modern understanding of what a modern independent woman is. I think regardless of what their own culture would have had them do or how they would have seen the world, basically. And so anyway, because of this, I think a lot of women, myself included, struggle to find ourselves within a female character. And for me, it's already hard because I'm wondering if you might identify with this, Evangeline, but I kind of want to be both the badass warrior with the bow and arrow, and I want to be the beautiful Helen of Troy, the face that launched 1,000 ships. You know, I want to be noble enough to defend someone and virtuous enough to be defended. So I mean, it goes on. Like, I want to be noble enough. I want to be in the spotlight and take my stand. I want to defy evil to its face, but I also want to do it like from the quiet living room, right in the corner with my rocking chair, like launching culture as the wise woman of the village. Anyway, but I only see one kind of female protagonist in modern storytelling. So if I am a consumer of more modern storytelling, how can I find examples of who I should be, especially as a Christian woman who is tasked, because I'm a Christian, to kind of look beyond culture and kind of transform it for God's kingdom? And that's a really tough question. It's a huge question. So I kind of really wanted to bring it back down to you guys. And Matt, you gave me a wonderful lead-in, and again, super admire that courage. But like, if you were to think of people like me, or, you know, in YA, young girls like me, like my daughter, right, who's, you know, wants to be the bow and arrow warrior princess, like, how would you write a character that could embody some of those traits?
You write a complex character. I mean, that's just women.
So just write a story about a woman that's real and authentic, and there you go.
Yeah, I wonder if going in with the thought, like, I need to make them strong, is maybe the backwards way to look at it. It's like, I want a character that's human and compelling. Mm-hmm. You know, and once you put that in, you know, a woman, you'll oftentimes end up with a strong character. But if you make it, like, maybe my problem, one of my possibly several problems with this character that I'm trying to get in my book, is I started backwards. It's like, how can I write a character that's so strong that people will think I'm, like, you know, all cool and right thinking and everything. Sure. Whereas instead it's like, okay, what is this human like? What are their desires? What's she afraid of? What are the lies she's telling herself? You know, all this stuff. Mm-hmm. Like, maybe starting there and going forward is better than you want the end product, like, they need to be awesome, but not know it, but they do know it.
That's great.
Well, strength is not always, and I know this goes without saying, but strength is not always physical. Mm-hmm. And it's not always forgive me, Matt, the lawyer in the courtroom who makes the compelling argument. You know, it's not always the strongest voice.
Right.
Like we talked about, it's, you know, the making the decisions day to day. And so, not that there's a room for the physically strong heroine and the lawyer heroine in the courtroom, you know, defending the weak or making the art, you know, whatever. Sure. But there's also room for the everyday and the quiet strength. And I think, like, the longer I live life, and the more I see, the more I recognize that strength can come out of suffering.
Amen.
You know, and that it doesn't look like, you know, go out and conquer the world. It looks a lot of times like get out of bed.
Yeah.
When you really don't want to.
Mm-hmm. I know this is why I don't want to write any kind of novel until I'm, like, in my 50s, so that I can actually say, I have some wisdom now. I've been through some of this. But for real though, I mean, with all that wonderful, you know, it is hard to have courage, I think, as a Christian in general, but it's hard to have courage to do the small things because we all want that glory and affirmation.
Yeah.
So I love that you guys, you know, want to make that choice. You know, you want to make that choice to write characters that might not, you know, make it onto Marvel's cinematic universe, but like will actually be the ones that last, right? So I want to end with a quote that I don't remember perfectly, and I keep thinking I've memorized it, and then I try to say it, and I don't remember it. But
that being said, go for it.
Yes. There is a lovely quote, and it says something to the effect of, "The ones who are the people who." See, no, hold on 1 second. The people that make the most difference are those who lie in unvisited tombs and unmarked graves. Yeah. It's not that I want that for myself, because I don't think any of us do. But if you think about, the fact that those are the people that really do, like, shape our culture and our lives and those quiet strengths, it's a little bit more palatable, right? To be that nobody, and not be the beautiful Hollywood perfected Amazon woman.
Oh, you really hate Wonder Woman.
Yes. What have we learned here today?
Just kidding. Well, you guys, that is about it. I am so happy that you discussed this with me today. And I just have to say that sadly things are winding down at the Anselm Digital Pub. The fire is down to embers and the customers are trundling home. We polished off our final glasses and we are ready to maybe snooze. Once again, Believe to See is a podcast of the Anselm Society Arts Guild. To find out more about the Anselm Society, please visit us at anselmsociety.org. And while you're at it, please rate and review the show on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you again for joining us, and we'll see you next time.